So I want to talk about my space station environment. In the microgravity of space, you can make artificial gravity by basically spinning it. Anybody who's watched 2001, that old movie about, has a wonderful scene in a rotating torus. It makes artificial gravity, but it's radially out from the center of this rotating torus. And so clearly we're not going to use Unity's gravity. We have to make the gravity ourselves. I needed a model of a space station, and I didn't have any, so I have a maker script that instantiates just a bunch of prefab beams and a ring around the object. It puts caps on the end of it so that you can't fall out the sides. And I believe it drops a bunch of random stuff in the volume that then fall down within the space station. And the maker script has prefabs for the beams and the caps and the objects and how many objects you want and so forth. It's really just populating this circle of with objects at different positions around the circumference of the thing. It does use the quaternion from to rotation to take the vector up of the little beam and put it in the right orientation, which with the circle turns out to just be its position, which is, I have the circle oriented in the YZ plane, so the X is 0, and instantiate that, give it a name, a color, and here's that trick to make everything the parent, the child of the manifesting object. So everything ends up being a child of the maker. And here, this is just the two caps that go on either side of this thing to enclose the station. And then this spawning objects thing just makes objects that at some interval that randomly rain down in the world. And so the thing looks kind of like this, and there are all these beams around the circle, and here are these objects that are kind of falling down in it. So the first time I did this, I put a gravity script on the maker, the actual object that's at the center of this circle of beams. And so in start, I found all objects of type rigid body. I turned off their gravity, and in the fixed update, I'm finding them again because that instantiator is making new rigid bodies periodically, and go through and just make sure that if it's that I'm not fiddling with an is kinematic object. And I form this direction between the center of the circle and the object's position. Zero out the X component of that because I don't want any forces lateral to the space station, and then just add the force to the objects and they fall appropriately. And this did work, but a centralized script is kind of, it's a potential bottleneck. It's one thing doing all the work, and also there's the issue of handling rigid body objects like the falling objects differently than the character that has to be oriented in a particular way. And so I decided to put scripts on each of the objects that then handle the gravity. And so I have two scripts, gravity for objects and gravity for the player. Gravity objects is kind of the inverse of that global, or that centralized one. In this case, the gravity object finds the maker, the thing that's in the center, and it sets its own gravity to false. And then in the fixed update, it again just forms the vector between it and the maker. and sets the X component to 0 and forms this force magnitude and adds it as a force in that direction. And so, this works for those falling objects. The gravity player is a little more complex since I have to distinguish between times when the player is falling and hence uncontrollable, and times when the player is grounded and hence you can control it. And I initially tried the character controller, but the character controller seems to be specifically designed for upright operation in a Y-direction gravity field. So I went to a rigid body controlled player, which of course has its own issues. So the rigid body mover, it like the object sets its is kinematic to false, and in the update function, it does some fiddling here. There's a grounded test I'll show you in just a second. If it is grounded, I add a bunch of drag because my player was very twitchy. And getting the horizontal and vertical axes, horizontal scaled by rotate torque and vertical scaled by forward force is going to give me my the things that I use to control my player down here in the add force move direction and the add torque transform up by torque. So this is going to rotate and move my character forward. Now, you might notice this gravity in here, which is not defined anywhere. It's an exposed variable here. And that gravity is going to be set by the gravity player script. Here's the grounded testing. This is kind of the verbose version of it. Here's a kind of compressed one. We're basically doing a little short ray cast down from my player and seeing if I hit anything. And it's a short ray cast, only 1 meter long. So it kind of detects when we're grounded. So this gravity player, it's going to communicate with the mover, the kinetic rigid body mover, the script that does the force and torque on my player, where gravity is part of the motion direction, the move direction. So it finds the maker, the center of the thing, and it gets the component mover, the rigid body mover, and it reads from the mover whether it's grounded or not. So that motor on the character is detecting whether it's grounded or not, and this gravity player script is reading it from the mover. It then basically does what we've done before. We've got a direction between the maker and itself. We zero out the X component. There's a bit of a trick here with the angle, the cross product, and the rotate around. This is to make my character be upright in the gravitational field, and there are probably half a dozen different ways to do this, and this is probably one of the kludgier ones. I find the angle between the direction and the transform up, and I form a vector that is the cross product of those two that gives me then the axis about which I want to rotate. And then I rotate around that axis by this angle that I found between these. And this makes my character upright in the local gravity field. And then if I'm not grounded, I apply the force in that direction normalized. And if I am grounded, then I have this, I think I've actually changed this so that there's a 1 in there. I was distinguishing between grounded and not grounded, and it turns out it doesn't matter. So there's actually a 1 in the code. And this is the thing that's setting the gravity back here in the kinetic rigid body mover, where the gravity is used here, subtracting information out of the move direction that is the add force thing that we're doing. So this was my first kind of version of this. And so here's this running. I believe this is the strong jump situation here. And of course, Unity and Zoom working together takes some time. So I start off on a little platform in the center of my world. I can move around, I can jump. Oop, that's the strong jump. So of course it jumped all the way to the other side, and it takes a while for the camera to catch up with this thing. Because this is a rigid body character, it kind of skates, and it's very twitchy and kind of hard to control, and I was never very happy with it, although it works. I, of course, dressed up a pretty world with a beautiful skybox that I found that has the surface of the moon and the Earth in the sky. And so this is, I guess this is that space station that they're going to put in orbit around the moon. And if this ever starts, I can step off here. And of course, you can see that if I look out the side, we're definitely spinning in the world. And of course, it's not actually spinning, so that orientation never actually changes. That would be an added feature that you could do with this thing. And my little character can jump and navigate around in this spherical world. So that was all cool, but I was never happy with that twitchy character. And so I happened on Sebastian Legue's tutorial on spherical gravity. And this, Will, is the thing that I think you might find interesting. Let me close this out here and open another game. Spherical gravity. So Sebastian's tutorial on spherical gravity, and there's a link here below, it's a YouTube video, it was straightforward and way simpler than mine. It used 3 scripts. It has a first-person controller that's oriented with the mouse, moves in its current forward direction, which is adjusted by using that transform direction, which transforms the forward direction of my character into a world vector that is what I then push my character around with. I'm not using forces in this case. I'm using the rigid body move position, or Sebastian is using the rigid body move position command. And the move position command with the rigid body, the documentation says that the move position obeys the physics of the world, so that the object doesn't teleport, it moves appropriately from wherever position you are to where you're moving it to. And so it can actually collide with objects and do other stuff. His character did have a character controller on it, but it didn't seem to be necessary, and it worked when I took it off, so it's not there. Now, the other 2 scripts are the gravity attractor and the gravity body, and these handle the details of the spherical gravity. Gravity body is placed on any rigid body that you want to obey the spherical gravity, including our player. And so I did modify this slightly, so it has this reorient option, and this reorient option allows you to set constraints, which you do with a character, or not, which you would do for an object that you want to be able to roll and bounce around on the world. And so this is a public variable that you can set for whether you're a character or not. In Awake, we find the planet that has the gravity attractor on it. we get our rigid body and turn off Unity's gravity. And if we are orienting our character, I can freeze the rotation of my rigid body with the rigid body constraints. Fixed update does nothing except call a function that's on the planet, on the gravity center, and it passes it two bits of information: the rigid body that we're fiddling with, and the Boolean reorient to know whether we're going to orient the object or not. Gravity Attractor has just the function attract in it. That's this public void attract with its two arguments, the body and the Boolean reorient. It has the vector gravity up. And I also modified this to allow it to repel, because while Sebastian's is sucking into a planet, I wanted to put this in the center of my space station and repel the objects so that they all ended up stuck to the circle of beams that I had out there. And so there's also this Boolean attract, which is true if I want it to suck and false if I want it to repel. And so it's just a minus sign that takes that into account. And then we add our force to this thing and reorient the object's body. And we do this with a quaternion from to rotation, which takes the local up and points it in the gravity up direction. This is the thing that you might be using, Abby, and with your world that you're tilting guy. If you take the local up of your character and put it in the gravity's up direction, which would be the Y direction in your world. And then I just multiply that quaternion times the body rotation, which is a quaternion. And remember, a rotation times a quaternion times a quaternion is another quaternion. And I use then the rigid body move rotation to, which is kind of like the move position, except it moves the rotation of a rigid body in a physically plausible way, rather than just teleporting it. It moves it appropriately physically in the world. So surprisingly, this worked really well. Well, let me show you oh, that's not the one I wanted. Well, I'll show you this setup in the gravity world, in the space station world. So my character again manifests here on a little platform in the center, and oh no, it doesn't. So here's my character running around in the world, and the mouse, of course, tilts it. That's the way Sebastian's script works. And I can run around here and jump, and my little character spends some time in the little torus wandering around in here. And I believe I have a couple other stations of different radiuses. That's a 10 radius, and I have up to a 50 radius, and you can play with those. So I want to show you Sebastian's planets, because they're also really cool. So that's the planets here, which of course will take some time to generate. And while that's doing that, I mentioned that the one glitch that I encountered with Sebastian's thing was that the repelling gravity was radially out. And so if you were off the center line of the space station, your character ended up tilting a little bit because it was orienting to the direction of the gravity field. So a simple inclusion of gravity up dot x equals 0 inserted right here after the gravity up normalized, that fixed that particular little glitch. But of course, in the planetary case, you don't want to do that. So here's Sebastian's version with, if Unity ever catches up. So here it is with kind of strong gravity. We're able to walk around on our spherical world, look around here, and there are different objects that I believe we can push around a little bit, and they roll across the surface in appropriate ways. Here's one with very weak gravity, and in this case, I have to be careful. If I walk too fast, I can actually get airborne. There goes the little character airborne, and of course, I have to be really careful about jumping because I can jump too far and kind of never come back to the planet here. You can see the little character over here. I, of course, got carried away with this thing and rewrote the code so that it could have an array of attractors. So now I have 2 planets here, and I can jump from one planet to the other. And it, of course, orients to the dominant planet. And so I have a game here now where you can kind of jump around from one planet to another. Of course, if I'm over here and I jump, I'm going to end up back on my home planet, and repeated jumpings, because it's sucking to both planets, it tends to move towards the zenith spot here that'll be right below them. Oh, there, we almost made it to the 0 gravity spot. So a lot of interesting behavior here with the 2 planets. And of course, I did it for 3 planets, 4 planets, and I got tired of jumping myself. So here's one with an auto jumper that just the minute it touches down, it immediately jumps again. And so we have this little bounce around among 4 different worlds as it is attracted to all 4 of them, and it's summing up that gravity vector of them and deciding which one it's going to ultimately fall down to and bounce among them. So clearly I had a lot of fun with that. And here's 4 planets with a whole bunch of jumpers and a lot of objects falling down in the world. And we're kind of at the center of this whole thing, watching the chaos around us as these jumpers fly through the air. And sometimes they even encounter some of the objects, and that deflects them from their trajectory. So a lot of fun with that. And that was Sebastian's spherical gravity. This is the business about that move position, and one of the glitches I found was sometimes the rigid body would walk through a collider, and I think that has to do with the way move position works. That if the body is kinematic, it actually acts like a teleport. So that might be why it was getting through objects, and this issue of many planets. Sebastian's controller has, because it's using the mouse, it has settable sensitivities. It has walk speed, jump force, a ground mask that it uses. This is just to lock the cursor that I hate always disappears. But basically, we've got this business up here that's kind of orienting the camera. We've got our input from the horizontal and vertical axes. We're setting a move direction. This is a damping that kind of gradually moves from target move amount to target to move amount and replaces it. And down here, we're doing a local move that move amount that is in character space it gets transformed into world space, and that's where the move position goes from where it is now to adds that local move vector to it. Here's the grounded testing. I just noticed that, this is maybe why Sebastian had a character controller on it, was that he was using the character controller. If it hit something, that meant that it was grounded, but I think I took the character controller off, so that probably isn't functioning. So finally, let me quit this one and load one other one here that I have. With this one, the Pro Builder tools have a lot of different shapes that you can make, and one of the shapes is a torus. And so I very happily went into Pro Builder and made myself a big torus that I could then use as my space station. I actually made a bunch of them. And it's real interesting. In Pro Builder, you can turn the object inside out. So I forget who it was talking about their gun that was accidentally inside out. Well, here intentionally, I'm turning these toruses inside out. So the front face that is rendered is now the inside of the torus. And the collider, the mesh collider that we're using is also on the inside of the torus. And so if this ever gets going, I'll show you the tori that I've made for my space station. I did find that the way these toruses are assembled with their different triangles and their mesh colliders, that Sebastian's, is it opening? Sebastian's I don't know what's happening here. There it goes. Sebastian's controller was not happy with walking around on the mesh controller or the mesh collider of the tori. It had a lot of trouble with it. So I've kept that ring of beams that are still in the torus that kind of make a floor in my torus. But here's the game played in a proper torus. I have, I think, 5 or 6 of them that I can select among. And you can see that it's inside out. As I look down into the torus, I can see into the inside of it. But when I drop down through it, I fall through the roof because its collider is set to only be inside, and I can see it. If I jump here, I hit the ceiling. I can't get out of the torus, and now I have this proper torus that I can walk around in. And the T key selects among a set of different toruses I've made, including one that I using Pro Builder. And the Pro Builders has the ability to do Boolean operations on 2 different shapes, and you can use one shape to cut out another shape. And so I kind of cut out the top of my torus so that now I have an open box, an open torus that I can. And now I can actually jump here, and I guess I don't have enough jump to get across it. Yeah, I can repeated jump and actually get across it. So I have that torus. And the interior tori here, they have proper colliders on them so that if I run up against the wall here, I kind of act okay. But I did find that if I didn't put this maker in here, that there were definite issues with walking around on the inside of this torus. So all of this was a lot of fun, and I really appreciate Sebastian for providing us with this particular tool, and and ProBuilder for giving me a proper Tori. So I'll stop sharing there and entertain any questions, and I forget Mr. Hallett. Is Will gone? No, you're there. And Will, this is this spherical gravity you could use on your little planets that you're making, which would be cool. You could walk around on those things that you've made. And I will post this whole thing so you can cut the code out if you want to use it. Open the pod bay doors, Hal. Peter's seen the movie. Yep. Okay. Any comments, questions, suggestions? If not, I'm going to stop recording.